What happens if my tenant dies in Maryland? A Ghost Right to Possession by Brian Pendergraft, Esquire. And you can download the slides to this presentation at tpf.legal/deaf. Disclaimer: this is legal information, not legal advice. For legal advice specific to your situation, contact an experienced landlord-tenant attorney. Any legal statutes interpreted in this presentation are a matter of opinion only. What happens to my lease if my tenant dies in Maryland? The general rule is that in the absence of a contrary lease provision, death of a landlord or tenant does not terminate the lease or the responsibilities under the lease. The estate of the tenant still has the right to possession of the property and is still responsible for paying rent. In a sense, nothing happens. Maryland Real Property Code Section 8-328. If a tenant under a lease dies, distress may be brought against the tenant named in the lease, regardless of death. Simple translation: landlords can sue their deceased tenants. The statute then lays out two rules for service of process on a deceased tenant's estate. If the tenant has a personal representative, then the landlord must give notice to the personal representative and must certify to the court that he has given notice. If the tenant does not have a personal representative, then there is a posting requirement. Landlords that violate this rule can be held liable by the tenant's estate. In practice, the district court failure to pay rent form has a box to check off to alert the court of deceased tenants. What to do if my tenant dies in Maryland? Unless the landlord takes legal action, the tenant's estate still has the right to possession of the property because death does not terminate tenancies. Landlords can initiate a possession action such as failure to pay rent to seek possession of the property. On the other hand, landlords do not have the right to terminate the lease agreement if their tenant's estate keeps paying. If the tenant's estate has a personal representative, then the landlord can try working out a payment plan or an early termination agreement instead of going to court. The personal representative may be willing to pay rent while she administers the estate. You can't just do nothing and expect to recover, or can you? The general rule is that landlords have a duty to mitigate damages caused by their tenant's breach of lease in Maryland. Maryland Code Real Property, Section 8-207. Landlord's duty to mitigate damages. The aggrieved party in a breach of lease has a duty to mitigate damages if the damages result from the tenant's termination of occupancy before the end of term. For example, if a tenant just abandons a property, a landlord makes no efforts to find new renters, then the tenant has a winning argument that the landlord is not entitled to any losses according to this rule. However, death does not terminate tenancies in Maryland. This rule, strictly interpreted, does not apply to deceased tenants. This rule applies if a tenant terminates the occupancy before the end of the term, i.e. abandonment. Death is not abandonment. Because death does not terminate tenancies, it technically does not trigger the landlord's duty to mitigate damages under this rule. So there is an argument that landlords can hold the deceased tenants to the remainder of the lease without attempting to mitigate damages. The very strong counterargument. Landlords should strongly consider taking actions to mitigate damages. If a landlord knows that a tenant is no longer paying rent because the tenant has died and makes no effort to mitigate damages, then I'd argue that the landlord is being unreasonable and should not be able to recover financial compensation from the tenant's estate, and that death should be treated similarly to abandonment and the statute should apply, particularly for residential leases. Points to remember. Death does not automatically terminate tenancies. Landlords have the right to receive rent. The tenant's estate has the right to possession of the property. Landlords must go to court to retake possession of the rental if their tenant's estate is not paying. Landlords can also try to work out a payment plan or early termination of lease with the tenant's personal representative. Do something. There is a strong argument that landlords have a duty to mitigate damages or they lose the right to financial compensation if they do nothing. Need help getting possession of your rental or to negotiate with heirs? You can contact me at info@tpf.legal or 301-205-9013. Thanks for watching. Don't forget you can download the slides to this presentation at tpf.legal/def.